Lieutenant Kate Morrison's knuckles whitened around her ceremonial sidearm as she watched the Vexthor delegation crowd around Unity Station's shooting range. Their crystalline carapaces clicked and chattered with barely contained amusement as they observed the primitive human facility. The sound reminded her of breaking glass, which seemed fitting given their fragile egos. "Observe, honored representatives," Ambassador Galactic's translator hummed, their primary appendages gesturing toward their youngest initiate. "Even our untrained youth surpass human capabilities." The initiate, barely out of their metamorphosis stage, stepped up to the firing line. Their targeting computers hummed to life, neural networks connecting through the crystalline structures that covered their form. Kate fought to keep her face neutral as the gathered diplomats from 17 species pressed closer. The Vexthor had chosen their moment well. This demonstration coming right before the Defense Council vote on Earth's status upgrade from provisional to full member. The initiate fired. Perfect shots, everyone. Their targeting computers didn't even need to adjust after the first round. The assembled aliens murmured appreciatively as holographic targets dissolved under precision hits. "Your species' insistence on maintaining manual targeting systems is..." Galactic paused, mandibles twitching in what Kate had learned was their equivalent of a condescending smile. Charming. Like watching primitives discover fire while standing in a fusion plant. A Centaurian diplomat chittered something that the translator rendered as laughter. Kate's grip tightened further. 6 years of human integration into the Galactic Confederation, and still they were treated like curious pets who had somehow stumbled onto faster-than-light travel. "Perhaps," Galactic continued, "we should consider humanity's application for full membership after they've had time to properly modernize their military capabilities." The ambassador's secondary arms made adjustment gestures at their neural interface. "Our records indicate your species still trains in something called Kentucky windage." "How quaint." Kate stepped forward, her boots silent on the padded floor. "Ambassador, would you care to see a demonstration of human marksmanship?" She kept her voice steady, professional, just like her training officer had taught her. "Let them underestimate you." The Vexthor's crystalline segments shifted colors. Amusement, if she remembered her xenobiology correctly. "Lieutenant Morrison, isn't it? Your enthusiasm is noted, but surely you understand the gap between our capabilities. Our targeting computers process variables your organic brains cannot even perceive." "Then you should have no concern about a friendly competition." Kate smiled, channeling every diplomatic session she'd been forced to attend. "Unless you believe your technology might falter under actual challenge conditions." The assembled diplomats went quiet. Galactic's carapace flickered between patterns rapidly. Surprise, then calculation. "You propose a contest. A public demonstration. Your champion versus humanity's best. Full environmental variables, moving targets, and combat conditions." Kate stepped closer, noting how the Vexthor's segments shifted to an agitated purple. "Unless you're worried about risking your reputation against primitives." Galactic's translator crackled as they switched to formal diplomatic mode. "You understand the implications of such a challenge. The losing species would face considerable embarrassment." "Then let's raise the stakes." Kate felt sweat on her palms, but pressed on. "Put Earth's Defense Council voting rights on the line. If we win, we get full membership status. If we lose, we accept probationary status for another 5 years." The ambassador's crystalline form practically vibrated with anticipation. "Agreed. We shall select our champion. Zixven, holder of the perfect sight accolade. You have 1 standard month to prepare your best shooter." Their mandibles clicked rapidly. "Though given human limitations, you might wish to spend that time updating your membership application instead." As the delegation moved away, already celebrating their assumed victory, Kate allowed herself a small smile. Her hand brushed against the hidden pocket of her uniform, where a worn photograph showed her standing next to Master Sergeant Reynolds at the Mars Sniper School graduation. The old Marine had taught her that overconfidence was the deadliest target of all. She had one call to make, And if she was lucky, Reynolds wasn't too deep in his Montana wilderness to answer. The Vex Thor were about to learn why humans had never fully trusted their targeting computers, and why some skills were worth keeping sharp the old-fashioned way. Kate's transport touched down in a small clearing, sending fallen pine needles swirling in the downdraft. Montana's Bitterroot Mountains stretched endlessly before her, their peaks disappearing into low-hanging clouds. According to her intel, Master Sergeant Jack Reynolds had chosen this remote location for a reason. It was one of the few places left on Earth where satellite coverage had blind spots. She shouldered her pack and checked her compass. Old-school navigation, just like Reynolds had taught her at sniper school. The path ahead wound through dense forest, unmarked on any official maps. As she walked, Kate remembered Reynolds' first lesson. Technology fails. Nature endures. Learn to read both. A twig snapped behind her. "You're getting sloppy, Lieutenant." Reynolds' gravelly voice carried through the trees. "I counted 3 mistakes in your approach. Would have been dead twice over." Kate turned to find her old mentor emerging from the shadows of a massive pine. Despite being in his 60s, Reynolds moved like a man half his age. His beard had gone fully gray, but his eyes retained that unnerving sharpness that had made him legendary during the Mars insurgency. "Maybe I wanted you to find me, Master Sergeant." Kate smiled. "Save me the trouble of tracking you through these woods for hours." Reynolds grunted, but she caught the hint of amusement in his expression. "Heard about your little diplomatic incident, taking on the Vex Thor in a shooting match." He shook his head. "Either you've gone crazy, or you've learned something interesting about our crystalline friends." "Both, actually." Kate pulled out her tactical pad. "Got something you need to see." Reynolds led her to a cabin nestled against a cliff face. Solar panels blended seamlessly with the rock, and Kate spotted at least 3 carefully concealed security systems. Inside, the cabin was sparse except for one wall covered in weapons. Everything from ancient bolt-action rifles to modern plasma carbines. "Still keeping up with the neighbors, I see," Kate commented. Reynolds activated a holographic display on his workbench. "Show me what you brought." Kate transferred the footage of the Vex Thor demonstration. Reynolds watched in silence, his eyes narrowing at certain moments. When it finished, he replayed specific segments, focusing on the Initiate's shooting sequence. "They're getting cocky," he finally said. "See this?" He froze the image on the Initiate's carapace. "Their new neural networks are faster, but they're sacrificing redundancy for speed. One disruption in their crystalline matrix, and the whole system crashes," Kate finished. "But that's not why I came." She met his gaze. "The rumors about Operation Longshot. They're true, aren't they? You've faced their targeting systems before." Reynolds was silent for a long moment. He walked to the weapon wall and removed an old Marine Corps sniper rifle. 10 years ago, Deep Space Recon mission. We encountered a Vex Thor scout ship before first contact. They opened fire, claiming our trajectory violated their space. Lost half my team to their automated defense systems. He checked the rifle's action with practiced ease, but they didn't expect us to keep fighting after their first salvo knocked out our targeting computers. Called it tactically irrational in their report. A grim smile crossed his face. Turned out old-fashioned ballistic calculations and Kentucky windage work just fine in zero-G, especially when your enemy doesn't believe you can fight back. "Will you train me?" Kate asked. 1 month to beat their best. Reynolds set down the rifle. "I'll train you, but not just in shooting." He pulled up another holographic file. Detailed scans of Vex Thor physiology. "We're going to teach them why humans never trusted their lives entirely to computers. Why we kept practicing the old ways." He turned to Kate, and she recognized the look in his eyes. The same one he'd had before every major operation. The Vex Thor think they've mastered combat through perfect calculation. Time to show them what happens when the variables exceed their processing power. "When do we start?" Kate asked. Reynolds was already moving toward the door. "We started the moment you landed. Grab your gear. Let's see if you remember how to shoot without a targeting computer whispering in your ear. Outside, storm clouds gathered over the mountains. Perfect weather for learning how to embrace chaos. Again, Reynolds commanded, his voice carrying over the mountain wind. Kate chambered another round, her fingers numb from the pre-dawn cold. For 5 days straight, they'd been running drills before sunrise, when the light played tricks on both human eyes and electronic sensors. The target flashed at the edge of her vision, a holographic projection mimicking the Vex Thor's movement patterns. Kate tracked, adjusted, and fired in one fluid motion. The shot pierced the projection's crystalline matrix simulation exactly where a neural cluster would be. Better. Reynolds lowered his binoculars. You're reading the light refraction patterns. Now watch this. He activated his tactical display, showing footage from the Vex Thor champion, Zixven's latest propaganda broadcast. See how their carapace shifts when they're targeting. Kate studied the aliens' movements. There's a delay, barely perceptible, but it's there, right before they fire. Exactly. Reynolds froze the frame. Their neural networks need that split second to process environmental data. They're so focused on achieving perfect calculations, they've never learned to trust instinct. He pulled up another display, this one showing detailed scans of Vex Thor optical systems. Look at the crystalline structure. Their entire targeting system relies on light passing through these matrices in predictable patterns. Perfect for stable conditions, but vulnerable to unexpected variations. Kate finish, realization dawning. That's why you're training me at dawn and dusk. The changing light conditions create micro-refractions their systems can't properly calculate. Reynolds smiled grimly. In their pursuit of perfection, they've engineered away their ability to adapt. Every targeting solution has to be completely computed before they can fire. Kate set down her rifle, mind racing. The competition venue. They chose Typhon 3, thinking its atmospheric interference would give them an advantage. But with these crystal matrices, the storm patterns will create chaos in their targeting systems. Reynolds brought up meteorological data for the moon. They're so convinced of their superiority, they didn't even consider that the environment they chose might work against them. A message alert flashed on their tactical display. Another broadcast from Zixven, this one showing the champion destroying targets while suspended upside down in zero gravity. The aliens' movements were flawless, each shot hitting with mechanical precision. They're showing off, Kate observed. But look, they're still using controlled conditions. Laboratory-perfect environments. Reynolds nodded. The Vex Thor never adapted their combat doctrine after our encounter. They dismissed it as a fluke, convinced their technology could never be overcome by primitive methods. He pulled up his classified mission files. They don't understand that human marksmanship evolved specifically to handle chaotic conditions. Kate studied the champion's movements more carefully now. Every shot is perfect. Too perfect. They're not accounting for natural variation at all. Their neural networks filter out environmental noise that might affect targeting. Which means, Reynolds prompted, the same way he had during her sniper training. Which means they're missing crucial data. Kate's eyes lit up with understanding. They're so focused on achieving mathematical perfection, they're blind to the subtle patterns in the chaos. Patterns a human brain can recognize and utilize. Reynolds began breaking down his observation equipment. Tomorrow, we start training with prismatic lenses. You're going to learn how to create the kind of light distortions that will make their targeting systems glitch. By the time we're done, you'll be able to shoot through conditions that their computers can't even process. As if emphasizing his point, the morning sun crested the mountain ridge, sending rays of light fracturing through the crystal targets they'd set up. Each shard created unpredictable patterns of reflection and refraction, a beautiful chaos that no computer could perfectly predict. Kate picked up her rifle again, seeing the battlefield with new eyes. The Vex Thor had built their entire combat doctrine around removing variables. But on Typhon 3, surrounded by storms and atmospheric distortion, their greatest strength would become their greatest weakness. "Time to embrace the chaos," she said. "Chambers another round," and began tracking the dancing light patterns across their shooting range. "Environmental controls disengage," Reynolds announced, his voice barely audible over the howling wind inside the reinforced testing chamber. They'd converted his old bunker into a simulation of Typhon 3's atmosphere, complete with magnetic disturbances and unpredictable light patterns. Kate adjusted her position behind the rifle, watching the salvaged Vexthor sensor array they'd set up. The crystalline device pulsed with confused patterns as it tried to compensate for the chaos around it. 3 weeks of training had taught her to read these patterns like a book. "Starting magnetic pulse sequence," Reynolds called out. The air crackled with artificial energy, creating the same kind of storms they'd face in the competition. "Show me what you've learned." Kate breathed slowly, letting her mind settle into the space between instinct and calculation. The first target appeared, a holographic representation of a Vexthor warrior in full combat stance. She didn't fire immediately. Instead, she watched how the magnetic fields affected the light passing through its crystalline form. "Target locked," the Vexthor sensor announced, its artificial voice struggling with interference. "Calculating trajectory." Kate fired. The shot passed through a seemingly random pattern of magnetic distortion, curved slightly in the artificial gravity field, and struck the target's neural cluster simulation. Before the sensor could recalculate, she had already chambered another round and was tracking the second target. Their systems would still be processing the first environmental deviation, she explained, firing again. Another perfect hit. By the time they account for one variable, 3 more have changed. Reynolds monitored the sensor's attempts to keep up with the changing conditions. "Look at this," he said, pointing to the readout. "Complete cascade failure. Their targeting systems are trying to calculate every possible variable simultaneously. Like trying to solve a puzzle while someone keeps adding new pieces," Kate said, dispatching the third target with the same deadly accuracy. The more perfect they try to make their calculations, the further behind they fall. The salvaged sensor suddenly shut down, overwhelmed by the complexity of the environment. Reynolds smiled grimly, just like Operation Longshot. Their neural networks are designed for perfection, not adaptation. When faced with too many simultaneous changes, they crash, Kate finished, lowering her rifle. "But Zixvan must know this weakness exists. Why choose Typhon 3 for the competition?" Reynolds pulled up the latest intelligence briefing on his tactical display. "Pride. The Vexthor believe they've solved the environmental interference problem with their new quantum processing arrays. They want to humiliate us by beating us in conditions that should favor human instinct." Kate began breaking down her rifle, checking each component with practiced precision. "They've never released footage of their champions training in actual storm conditions," she noted. "Every demonstration has been in controlled environments." "Because they can't," Reynolds revealed, bringing up classified sensor data from his old mission. "Watch this." He played footage of the Vexthor scout ship's targeting systems trying to track his team during the encounter. The alien computers attempted to calculate every particle of debris, every magnetic eddy, until their processors simply couldn't keep up. "That's why you survived," Kate realized. Human instinct and training versus perfect calculation, when chaos reached a critical threshold. The simplest solution became the best solution. Reynolds nodded. "They're so convinced of their technological superiority, they've forgotten the fundamental rule of combat. The perfect is the enemy of the good." Kate reassembled her rifle with swift, sure movements. "2 more days of training," she said. "Then we show them why humans never abandoned manual targeting." "One last test," Reynolds said, activating the chamber's most extreme settings. Hurricane-force winds howled through the space as electromagnetic pulses created sheets of artificial lightning. "Let's see how their sensor handles this." Kate settled behind her rifle again, feeling the chaos swirl around her. Where the Vexthor saw random interference to be calculated and controlled, she saw patterns to be understood and used. Nature wasn't an obstacle to be overcome. It was an ally waiting to be embraced. "Send the targets," she said, and prepared to dance with the storm. Unity Station's main competition hall hummed with anticipation. Representatives from 17 species packed the observation galleries, their varied environmental suits creating a rainbow of colors and patterns. Kate stood at the human end of the firing line, methodically checking her rifle, while diplomatic cameras captured every move. "Primitive projectile weapon," one of the Centaurian observers noted, their translator barely containing the derision. "The human doesn't even have neural assistance modules." Zixvan, the Vexthor champion, stood at the opposite end. Their crystalline carapace gleamed under the station's lights, neural networks visibly pulsing with computational power. They made a show of calibrating their targeting systems, each movement precise and calculated. "Standard competition format," the chief judge announced, their mechanically neutral voice echoing through the chamber. 3 rounds, stationary targets, moving targets, and reactive scenarios. Scoring based on accuracy, time, and precision. Kate noticed Ambassador Galactic in the diplomatic box, their secondary arms making constant adjustment gestures, likely placing more bets against Earth. The odds on the Galactic networks had Earth at 500 to 1 against. "First round, stationary targets, Olympic standard," the judge declared. "Champion Zixvan will begin." The Vexthor champion stepped forward, their targeting systems humming to life. The first set of targets appeared, holographic representations at varying distances. Zixvan's shots came in rapid succession, each one striking dead center with mechanical precision. "Perfect score," the judge announced. "Time, 3.2 seconds." The alien audience chittered and hummed with approval. Kate caught Reynolds' eye in the human section. He gave an almost imperceptible nod. "Lieutenant Morrison, your attempt." Kate stepped up, deliberately taking her time to settle into position. She heard murmurs of impatience from the gallery. The targets appeared, identical to those Zixvan had faced. She took a deep breath, then moved. Her shots came slower than the Vexthor's, but each one flowed into the next like water. No wasted motion, no mechanical precision. Just smooth, natural accuracy that seemed almost casual. "Perfect score," the judge announced. Time, 3.1 seconds. The gallery went silent. "Impossible," Galactic's translator crackled. "Check the scoring systems." "Scoring verified," the judge confirmed. "Moving target round will commence in 5 minutes." Kate caught snippets of confused conversation as she reloaded. The Centaurians were recalculating their bets. A group of Proximan warriors were studying her stance with new interest. "The humans' movements are inefficient," Zixvan observed loudly, their crystalline form shifting to display confidence patterns. "Random elements in their technique will lead to inevitable failure." "Random," Kate smiled, remembering Reynolds' words, "or just too complex for your systems to predict." The moving target round began. Zixvan went first again, their neural networks processing each target's trajectory with perfect mathematical precision. Another perfect score, marginally slower due to the added calculations required. Kate stepped up for her attempt. This time, she let them see a hint of what was coming. Each shot anticipated the target's movements not through calculation, but through an understanding of natural motion that no computer could fully grasp. Her score matched Zixvan's, but her time was a full second faster. "Check the human for augmentations," Galactic demanded. "This performance exceeds their known capabilities." The judges conducted a full scan. Kate stood patiently as they confirmed what she'd known all along. No neural enhancers, no targeting computers, nothing but trained human skill and understanding. As they prepared for the final round, Kate noticed Zixvan's carapace flickering with new patterns, uncertainty masked by aggression. The Vexthor champion began running diagnostic checks on their targeting systems. "Problems with your calculations?" Kate asked innocently. "Our systems are perfect," Zixvan replied, but their secondary appendages twitched with agitation. "You cannot maintain this performance level." Kate chambered a fresh round, remembering the storms of Montana. "Perfect isn't always better," she said, loud enough for the gallery to hear. "Sometimes, it's just perfectly wrong." Typhon 3's atmosphere boiled with electromagnetic activity. Kate watched from the shuttle's viewport as purple lightning traced paths between towering storm clouds. The moon's magnetic field was so strong it made conventional targeting systems useless, exactly as the Vex Thor had planned. "Final stage will commence in 30 minutes, the announcement echoed through the shuttle's cabin. "All participants prepare for atmospheric insertion." Across the aisle, Zixvan's crystalline form pulsed with rapid calculations as their systems tried to process the chaos outside. Their support team had spent the entire flight adjusting their neural networks, adding layers of quantum processing to handle the electromagnetic interference. Kate smiled, remembering Reynolds' last words before she left Earth. "They'll try to solve chaos with computation. Let them." The landing pad emerged from the storm clouds, a reinforced platform anchored to one of Typhon 3's rare stable rock formations. Wind buffeted the shuttle as it touched down, and Kate felt the magnetic fields making her hair stand on end. "These conditions are suboptimal," Galactic announced as the delegation disembarked. "But our champion's enhanced systems will demonstrate true superiority over primitive organic targeting." Kate said nothing as she checked her rifle. No electronics, no targeting assistance, just precisely machined metal and optical glass. She'd removed even the basic rangefinder, relying entirely on skills honed in Reynolds' Montana storms. The competition zone stretched out before them, a series of platforms suspended in the turbulent atmosphere. Holographic targets would appear at random intervals, complicated by the ever-shifting magnetic fields and atmospheric distortion. "Champion Zixvan, you may begin," the judge announced through the environmental suit's comm system. The Vex Thor champion stepped up to the first position. Their carapace blazed with computational activity as their neural networks attempted to map the chaotic environment. The first target appeared, and Zixvan fired. Miss. A murmur ran through the assembled dignitaries. Zixvan's secondary appendages twitched in agitation as their systems recalibrated. The second shot hit, but only on the target's outer ring. Their third shot missed completely as a magnetic pulse disrupted their targeting calculations. "This interference exceeds predicted parameters," Zixvan's translator crackled, requesting atmospheric stabilization. "Denied," the judge responded. "Environmental conditions are part of the challenge." Kate watched as the Vex Thor champion struggled through their round. Each shot required longer calculations, their neural networks overwhelmed by the constant change in variables. Their final score was barely above qualifying level. "Lieutenant Morrison, your attempt." Kate stepped up to the position, feeling the storm's energy around her. Where Zixvan saw chaos to be controlled, she saw patterns to be understood. The first target appeared, partially obscured by electromagnetic distortion. She didn't try to calculate the magnetic field's effect on the bullet's trajectory. Instead, she felt it, the same way Reynolds had taught her to feel the mountain winds. Her first shot struck dead center. "Impossible," Galactic's translator squealed. "The magnetic interference." Kate's second shot cut off their protest. Another perfect hit. She moved through the course with fluid grace, each shot embracing rather than fighting the storm's chaos. The alien observers fell silent as she demonstrated what centuries of human marksmanship had perfected, the ability to work with nature rather than against it. "Perfect score," the judge announced as Kate hit the final target. "Time. Standard baseline." Zixvan's crystalline form had gone almost transparent with shock. Their support team huddled around displays showing Kate's performance data, trying to understand how she had achieved accuracy their computers claimed was impossible. "How?" the Vex Thor champion demanded. "Our systems are superior in every measurable way." Kate safed her rifle before responding. "That's the problem," she said. "You tried to measure the immeasurable. Sometimes the best targeting computer is the one between your ears." Above them, Typhon 3's storms raged on, a reminder that nature's chaos would always defy perfect calculation. And in that chaos, human adaptability had found its greatest advantage. The storm reached its peak as the final challenge began. Sheets of purple lightning created a web of electromagnetic energy across the competition zone. The floating platforms swayed in the violent winds, their stabilizers struggling against Typhon 3's fury. Final round, the judge announced through the crackling comm system. Dynamic combat simulation with multiple moving targets. Kate watched as Zixvan's support team made frantic last-minute adjustments to their champion's neural networks. The Vex Thor's crystalline form had taken on a clouded appearance, a sign of extreme processing stress, according to Reynolds' intelligence files. Our systems are rated for these conditions, Galactic insisted, but their translator couldn't hide the uncertainty in their harmonics. Champion Zixvan, demonstrate the superiority of our technology. The Vex Thor champion stepped onto the central platform. Their targeting systems engaged with an audible hum that cut through the storm's roar. The first wave of targets appeared. Holographic combat drones moving in unpredictable patterns, their paths altered by the magnetic turbulence. Zixvan's first shot went wide as a lightning burst scattered their targeting calculations. Their second shot clipped a target's edge, but their neural networks were already falling behind, trying to process too many variables at once. Multiple targeting solutions failing, Zixvan's systems reported, unable to achieve computational consensus. The champion's frustration manifested in increasingly erratic shots. Their perfect calculations, which had never failed in controlled conditions, crumbled in the face of natural chaos. Each missed shot caused their crystalline form to pulse with darker colors. Confusion turning to anger. Request auxiliary computing support, Zixvan demanded, their translator barely coherent. These conditions exceed design parameters. Denied, the judge responded. All external assistance is prohibited. Kate stepped forward, as Zixvan's round ended with their lowest score yet. The alien champion's neural networks were visibly glitching, unable to reconcile the difference between calculated perfection and chaotic reality. Lieutenant Morrison, begin your attempt. Kate shouldered her rifle, feeling the platform sway beneath her feet. The storm's energy made her skin tingle through her environmental suit. As the targets appeared, she didn't fight against the chaos. She became part of it. Her first shot threaded between two lightning bolts, catching a target in mid-spin. The second shot rode a magnetic eddy, curving impossibly to strike another target's critical zone. Each pull of the trigger was a conversation with the storm, not an attempt to impose order upon it. Impossible. Zixvan's translator shrieked. Your primitive weapon has no computational assistance, no targeting matrix, no quantum processing. Kate's response was another perfect shot that split the space between three magnetic distortions. We learned long ago that sometimes the best computer is the one that can admit it doesn't know everything. The gallery watched in stunned silence as she completed the course with unprecedented accuracy. Even the judge's mechanical voice carried a note of surprise as they announced her score. Perfect marks across all categories. New competition record established. Zixvan's crystalline form had become almost opaque with processing overload. Our calculations, our systems, they are perfect. How can you surpass perfection with primitive methods? Kate saved her rifle before responding. That's what you never understood. We didn't keep our primitive methods out of stubbornness. We kept them because they work. Because sometimes understanding chaos is better than trying to control it. The storm around them seemed to emphasize her point, its wild energy defying any attempt at perfect prediction. Lightning flashed across Zixvan's carapace, and for a moment, their neural networks reflected the chaos in fractalized patterns of light and shadow. The competition is concluded, the judge announced. Final results will be certified after. They were interrupted by the sound of crystalline fracturing. Zixvan's neural networks, pushed beyond their limits by the attempt to calculate the incalculable, had begun to crack under the strain. Their perfect system, faced with the reality of its own limitations, was literally breaking apart. 3 months after the Typhon 3 competition, Kate stood before a class of mixed species in the newly established Cooperative Combat Academy on Unity Station. The training hall, once filled with mockery of human methods, now hosted eager students from across the Galactic Confederation. The fundamental principle isn't about choosing between technology and instinct, she explained, watching as her students, including several Vexthor initiates, practiced with simplified projectile weapons. It's about understanding when to use each and how to combine them effectively. In the observation gallery, Reynolds watched with barely concealed pride. The old Marine had finally agreed to leave his Montana refuge to help establish the Academy's curriculum. His experience from Operation Longshot had become required reading for advanced tactical studies. Ambassador Galactic's approaches, the station's AI announced. The Vexthor ambassador's crystalline form had changed since the competition. Gone were the ostentatious displays of computational power. Instead, their neural networks pulsed with more subtle patterns, a sign of their species' ongoing adaptation. Lieutenant Morrison, Galactic's translator, hummed with new respect. The Defense Council has finished reviewing your recommendations for the joint training program. Kate nodded, remembering the heated debates that had followed her victory. Earth hadn't just gained full membership status, they'd revolutionized the Confederation's approach to combat training. The Council agrees, Galactic continued. Pure technological superiority is no longer considered the primary metric for combat effectiveness. Your demonstration proved that adaptability and understanding of natural principles are equally crucial. Below them, a young Vexthor initiate successfully hit a moving target without relying on their neural networks. Their crystalline form glowed with accomplishment as their human training partner offered congratulations. Your species' greatest gift to us wasn't defeating our champion, Galactic admitted. It was showing us our own blind spot. We had become so focused on perfecting our calculations that we forgot the importance of understanding the chaos we were calculating. Reynolds joined them, carrying a worn sniper rifle, the same one he'd used during Operation Longshot. Sometimes the old ways stick around for a reason, he said, not because they're perfect, but because they work when everything else fails. The Academy's success had sparked a renaissance in military thinking throughout the Confederation. Species that had relied entirely on automated systems began incorporating manual training. The Vexthor, once the most rigid adherents to pure technology, now led the way in combining neural networks with organic intuition. The Morrison principle, as it had become known in diplomatic circles, wasn't just about marksmanship. It represented a fundamental shift in how the Confederation approached problem-solving. Perfect calculation had its place, but understanding chaos, truly understanding it, opened doors that pure mathematics couldn't reach. Next month's class is already overbooked, Kate noted, watching her current students practice, including a delegation from the Centaurian Special Forces. They were most impressed by your performance in the magnetic storms, Galactic observed. Their own targeting systems suffered similar limitations, though they never admitted it until now. A chime sounded through the training hall, the signal for advanced exercises. Kate watched as her students moved to the environmental simulation chamber, where they would face conditions similar to Typhon 3 storms. Ready for another round? She asked Galactic, noting the ambassador's newly installed targeting modifications, designed to work with natural intuition rather than override it. Indeed, Galactic's translator hummed with anticipation. Though I doubt I'll ever match your score from the competition. That's not the point, Kate smiled, picking up her rifle. The point is understanding enough to adapt when the perfect solution isn't possible. As they prepared for the training exercise, Kate caught Reynolds' knowing grin. Humanity had earned its place among the stars not by being the strongest or most advanced, but by remembering something the others had forgotten. In a universe of chaos, the ability to adapt was the greatest weapon of all.